What if one of the most revolutionary business decisions in American history began with a problem no machine could solve? Not a product problem, not a sales problem, not even a technology problem, but a people problem. In 1914, Ford Motor Company had built one of the most advanced factories on Earth. Its machines were faster than anything the world had seen. Its assembly line was changing the future of manufacturing. Its Model T was on its way to becoming the car that would put America on wheels. But inside the factory, something was falling apart. Workers were quitting constantly. Some left after weeks, days, and even in the middle of a shift. The machines could move endlessly, but the people beside them could not. Then, on January 5, 1914, Henry Ford made an announcement so shocking that newspapers, business leaders, and factory owners across America could barely believe it. Ford Motor Company would pay eligible workers $5 a day, more than double the previous minimum wage. At a time when most industrial leaders were trying to control labor costs by paying less, Ford decided to pay more. Critics thought he was reckless, competitors thought he was dangerous, and some believed he was attacking capitalism itself. But Ford saw something others missed. The future of business would not belong only to the company with the best machines. It would belong to the company that understood the people operating them. This is the story of the Ford $5 day, a decision that looked like generosity, worked like strategy, and helped reshape the American middle class. To understand why the $5 day was so powerful, we need to return to America at the beginning of the 20th century. The country was changing at incredible speed. People were leaving farms for cities, immigrants were arriving in search of work, factories were expanding, and machines were transforming daily life. But for most Americans, the automobile was still a luxury. Cars were expensive, complicated, and often built for the wealthy. They were symbols of status, not tools for ordinary people. Henry Ford wanted to change that. His dream was not simply to build cars. His dream was to build a car affordable enough for the average American family. That dream became the Model T. Introduced in 1908, the Model T was simple, durable, and relatively affordable. But the real revolution was not only the car itself, it was the system Ford built to produce it. Before Ford's assembly line, building a car was slow and labor-intensive. Workers moved around the vehicle, installing parts and solving problems as they went. It required more time, more skill, and more variation. Ford reversed the process. Instead of workers moving to the car moved to the workers. Each person performed one specific task. One worker tightened a bolt, another attached a part. Another repeated the same motion again and again. The system was faster, more standardized, and more predictable, and the results were astonishing. The time required to build a Model T fell from around 12.5 hours to just 93 minutes. A process that once took more than half a day could now be completed in roughly the time it takes to watch a movie. To customers, it looked like progress. To managers, it looked like genius. To investors, it looked like the future. But to many workers, it felt like something very different. The assembly line did not only change production, it changed the meaning of work. A craftsman could once look at a finished object and say, "I helped make that." But on the line, many workers no longer built an entire car. They repeated one small task for hours. The work became easier to teach, but harder to endure. The machine never got bored, but people did. Ford had solved the problem of production speed, but he had created a new problem, which is human exhaustion. By 1913, Ford Motor Company faced a serious labor crisis. The company's turnover rate reportedly reached around 370%. That means Ford had to keep hiring massive numbers of workers just to maintain a stable workforce. For Ford, this was not just an employee problem, but a business threat. Because the assembly line depended on continuity. If workers left constantly, the line slowed down. If the line slowed down, production targets were missed. If production targets were missed, Ford's entire low-cost business model was at risk. Every business eventually faces the same question. What happens when a system is optimized for output, but not for people? Most companies respond by increasing control, more rules, supervision, pressure, and replacement. But Ford began to see the problem differently. The cheapest worker is not always the lowest paid worker. Sometimes the cheapest worker is the one who stays. Ford realized that turnover was not just an HR issue. It was a hidden cost inside the business model. Every worker who quit created training costs, productivity losses, quality risks, and operational disruption. The wage may have looked cheap on paper, but instability made it expensive in practice. So Ford made a decision that challenged the entire logic of industrial capitalism. He would not solve the labor problem by paying less, but by paying more. On January 5, 1914, Henry Ford and his vice president, James Couzens, announced a radical new plan. Eligible Ford workers could earn $5 a day. At the same time, the workday would be reduced from 9 hours to 8. Ford's previous minimum wage was about $2.34 a day, so, the new plan more than doubled that figure. The announcement spread quickly. Newspapers treated it like an economic earthquake. Some praised Ford as a visionary, and others believed he had lost his mind. A financial editor at the New York Times reportedly questioned whether Ford was crazy, and from the traditional business perspective, the criticism kind of made sense. If wages were simply a cost, then doubling them looked irrational. But Ford was using a different logic. He did not see the wage only as an expense, he saw it as an investment. That was the revolutionary idea behind the $5 day. A company could become stronger not by squeezing workers harder, but by making the job worth keeping. The reaction was immediate. Thousands of men came to Ford's Highland Park plant looking for work. Some arrived before sunrise, and some gathered in the cold January weather, hoping for a chance to earn what sounded like a life-changing wage. The crowds became so large that the situation turned chaotic. Police were called, people were pushed back, and fire hoses were reportedly used in the freezing weather. The promise of $5 a day had created a rush at the factory gates, and it is easy to understand why. For workers in 1914, this was not just extra income. It meant the possibility of better housing, a more secure family life, savings, and a level of dignity that many industrial jobs just did not provide. A higher wage was not only about money. It gave workers a chance to think beyond survival. But the $5 day was not as simple as it sounded. It was not a universal raise with no conditions. Part of the $5 functioned as profit sharing, and workers had to qualify for it. The qualification was not only based on performance inside the factory. Ford Motor Company created what became known as the sociological department. This department investigated workers' lives outside work. Their inspectors visited homes, asked questions about family life, evaluated living conditions, and judged personal habits. Workers were expected to avoid heavy drinking, maintain clean homes, support their families, and live according to the company's definition of respectability. From Ford's perspective, this was part of building a stable workforce. He believed disciplined lives would create disciplined workers. But from a modern perspective, it feels deeply intrusive. Imagine your employer not only measuring your performance at work, but judging your home, your habits, your family, and your private life. This is the paradox of Henry Ford. He could be visionary and controlling at the same time. He wanted to improve workers' lives, but he also wanted to define what an improved life should look like. That tension is important because the $5 day was not pure charity. It was a business strategy wrapped in a moral vision. And like many revolutionary ideas, it carried both promise and control. Ford needed workers to stay. He needed the assembly line to run consistently, production to increase, costs to fall, and he needed the Model T to remain affordable. The $5 day helped solve these problems at once. Higher wages attracted workers, better jobs reduced turnover. A more stable workforce made the assembly line more reliable. A more reliable assembly line improved productivity. Higher productivity helped lower the cost of the Model T. Lower prices helped expand demand, and rising demand allowed Ford to sell more cars. This was the flywheel. Ford was not simply being generous, he was redesigning the relationship between wages, productivity, and consumption. Most business leaders saw workers mainly as costs, but Ford saw something more powerful. He saw workers as part of the market. If workers earned more, they could buy more. If ordinary people could buy more, mass production had a much larger customer base. And if mass production reached enough customers, a company could grow beyond anything the old industrial model allowed. That idea became one of the foundations of what people later called Fordism: high productivity, higher wages, lower prices, mass consumption. Well, it was not a perfect system, because it did not benefit everyone equally, and it had real human costs and serious contradictions. But it changed the economic imagination of the 20th century. Before Ford, many industrial leaders thought of workers mainly as labor. Ford helped popularize a different idea. The worker was also a customer. This was revolutionary because it connected two worlds that many businesses treated separately: the factory floor and the marketplace. If workers were paid too little, they could produce goods, but could not afford to participate in the economy those goods created. But if productivity gains were shared more broadly, workers could become consumers, and consumer demand could fuel business growth. The $5 day became a symbol of that new bargain. Workers helped create prosperity. In return, they received enough income to participate in it. This did not mean Ford alone created the American middle class. History is far more complex than that. But his decision became one of the clearest symbols of a new economic possibility, which is a company could pay better wages and still become more successful. In fact, under the right system, better wages could help make success possible. More than a century later, the $5 day still feels surprisingly relevant. Companies today are living through their own version of Ford's problem. Automation is rising, artificial intelligence is changing work, gig platforms are reshaping labor, and burnout is spreading across industries. Businesses are still asking the same question Ford faced in 1914. How do you build a system people are willing to stay in? Many companies talk about efficiency as if people are obstacles to be minimized, but Ford's story shows that efficiency without human stability is fragile. You can build the best process in the world, but if the people inside it feel exhausted, invisible, or replaceable, the system will eventually pay the price. Maybe not immediately, maybe not in the next quarterly report, but eventually it appears. Every business has a hidden factory. It is not made of steel or machinery, but it is made of trust, motivation, skill, memory, and commitment. When those things disappear, the business becomes weaker, even if the machines keep running. For founders, CEOs, managers, and anyone building a business, the lesson is not simply to double wages tomorrow. The real lesson is deeper. Design a business model where people and productivity rise together. If your strategy depends on constant burnout, it is not a strategy, it is a countdown. If your growth depends on people having no better option, your advantage is fragile. If your company treats workers as disposable, they will leave the moment a better opportunity appears. The strongest businesses are not only efficient, but more importantly, worth committing to. That was the hidden genius of the $5 day. Ford made the job more valuable, and because it became more valuable, people wanted it. People stayed longer, and the system became stronger. The wage was not separate from the strategy. The wage was the strategy. In the end, the $5 day was not really about $5. It was about a belief that a worker was not merely a pair of hands. A wage was not merely an expense. A factory was not merely a machine, and that the future of business would belong to those who understood a simple truth. People do not build great companies because they are forced to stay, but they build great companies when the opportunity is worth staying for. Henry Ford did not invent that truth, but on January 5, 1914, he put a price on it, $5 a day, and the world has been arguing about it ever since. Here on Business Case Files, we dig deep into the world's biggest business scandals, hidden strategies, and the powerful people shaping our world. Our investigations go beyond headlines and asking tough questions to reveal what really drives decisions that impact millions. We uncover the rise and fall of corporate empires, the deals behind closed doors, and the people quietly shaping the business landscape. If you want to understand how money and influence really work, this is the place for you. We help you see the connections and real stories shaping our economy. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode.